As I've mentioned before in teaching this course, throughout the semester, we're going to be debating nature versus nurture. Are you who you are mostly because of biology or because of the environment that you grew up in? And I'm talking about everything, not just how you look, how tall you are, the color of your eyes and things like that, but even things like your interests and so on. Recently, for my wife's birthday, I gave her this kit that she wanted where they would analyze her DNA and tell her all sorts of things about herself. Interestingly, she over the years had believed that somewhere in their family tree there was probably some Native American DNA, if you will, and yet the report showed none. In fact, it showed that she was mostly, I think, English and Irish or something like that. I got the report here that she got back from this place. It's called 23andMe, where they analyze your DNA. Basically, as you'll see in a little video clip that you'll watch during this topic, where they can check someone for something like 109 different genetic markers that basically could produce an offspring with some sort of genetic abnormality. For that test, they collect a saliva sample, and that's the same thing that they did with my wife. So she basically spit in a test tube, shipped it off to this place, and she got back this report. And as it turned out, she is about 89% British and Irish, and about 9% French and German, and overall Northwestern European 99.8%. There's not an ounce of Native American DNA in her family history. And all these years she kind of grew up believing that they had some Native Americans in their past. So that's kind of interesting. She thinks I should do this. My history of my family is literally, as far as I know, half Norwegian and half Italian. My great-great-great-grandfather came to America from Norway, and so I know that. An uncle of mine produced this huge family tree showing kind of tracing the roots of the Grandguards back to an area of Norway called Gul, G-O-L. I only pronounce it Gul because I had a student in class years ago in this very course who was from Norway, and she said it's pronounced Gul. And she said that area of Norway is kind of known for its ski resorts, so that's kind of interesting. But anyway, in my maternal grandparents both migrated to the United States from Italy. So I always like to say I'm half Norwegian and half Italian. But it would be interesting, certainly, to get an analysis of myself along these lines. What's interesting, though, to me, is this goes way beyond telling your ancestral history, so to speak, in that it predicts all kinds of other things based on your DNA. In other words, there are things besides how tall you are, your hair color, your eye color, and all those kinds of things that are based on biology as much as anything else. For example, here, if you look at this, whether or not you're likely to have dandruff, and whether or not you have a fear of heights. According to my wife's analysis, she's more likely than average to have a fear of heights. She's less likely to have a fear of public speaking. This is in your DNA. Can you believe this? What's interesting is she and I have found this report to be pretty accurate, even though they didn't get a picture of her or anything like that. Simply a spit sample, if you will. Let's see here. Ice cream flavor preference. More likely to prefer chocolate over vanilla. Mosquito bite frequency. Likely to be bitten as often as others. I personally get bit by mosquitoes all the time, so I'll be interested if I do this 23andMe, what kind of analysis I'll get out of it. Motion sickness, less likely to experience motion sickness. She never gets airsick when we fly or anything like that. Let's see, sweet versus salty. This says she's likely to prefer sweets over saltiness. And this is especially an interesting one. Wake up time. It says she's likely to wake up around 6:41 a.m. every morning. And you know what? She does. It seems to have nothing to do with how much sleep she got or how tired she was when she went to bed or anything else. She wakes up around 6:41. It's quite interesting. It also suggests that she's easily aroused from sleep, and that's true. In fact, it's amazing. She can be out cold on the couch watching television for about an hour or more, and all I've got to do is go up and go into another room and flip a light switch, and this would be a room where the light doesn't shine into the living room where she's lying on the couch. But just the click of the light switch, she'll wake up immediately. Is that because of environment factors? Are these learned behaviors, or is it in her DNA? Well, I would love for you to watch a movie that really gets to this topic, and it's called Three Identical Strangers. It used to be available for viewing in the ACC library, and I required students in this course to watch it. Back when I was teaching the course in the classroom, I actually showed the entire movie. It's so important. Talk about nature versus nurture. This is the ultimate. It's also very controversial in the fact that there were these three identical triplets that were born in New York, and their birth mother gave them up for adoption. And what was interesting was, without telling anyone, including the birth mother, they put these three boys in separate homes. They put one with a family that was more affluent, where the father was a physician and the mother was an attorney. They put another infant in a family that was more middle class, where the father was a teacher and the mother was a homemaker. And they put the third boy in a home where the family were new immigrants to the United States, and basically they owned their own convenience kind of store in New York. And throughout their lives, under the auspices of, we're going to go and follow up on the adoption to see how the kids are doing, psychologists and people like that would go into the homes and they would give the kids intelligence tests and personality tests and achievement tests, and they would take videos, films of the kids growing up. Now, these kids were all born in the mid-60s, and the cover of this whole story got blown in the 1980s when two of them went off to college and picked the same school. Well, actually, one had gone the year before and decided not to go back, and the following year, his twin brother decided to go to that same college in upstate New York, only to have all kinds of people, high-fiving him. It's good to see you today. Girls running up to him and kissing him. He thought this was weird in that, as he says, nobody gets this kind of reception on your first day at college. As it turns out, he didn't know he had this twin brother. And when this story made the news, the third guy was like, wow, they look just like me. And as it turns out, I have the same birthday they have. And these girls that are running up and kissing them, they're my type too. So it was quite the story. But it became, to take on a rather sinister tone. They eventually found out that there were probably maybe as many as a dozen sets of identical twins involved in this study, which, by the way, was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health. And this brings up all kinds of ethical issues. But remember this, back in the 60s, a lot of these ethics that we have today didn't really exist. And so the debate goes on. The video is no longer available through the ACC library. I've looked and looked and looked, and the librarians have looked on how to make it available. Please, if you have a chance, somehow watch it. This is a copy I actually picked up, I think for $1, maybe $2 at the most, at a used bookstore. You can watch it on Hulu and Netflix and places like, well, maybe not Netflix. It used to be on Netflix. But you can watch it on YouTube and things like that, but you got to rent it for a few bucks. It's worth the money you would spend, believe me. I will talk more about the details of this in my lecture that's coming up on nature versus nurture. So I just wanted to give you a little pep talk. This is a topic that, as the semester wears on, you're going to find yourself flip-flopping on, I think. As I think I said in the orientation video, when I was an undergraduate and a sociology major, I would have said, oh, it's mostly environment. And then after I had been a psychologist for about a decade, I thought, no, it's not just environment. I've encountered too many screwed up children that, as far as I can tell, came from really good homes. And since I've been a parent for nearly 4 decades and a grandparent for over a decade, I would say it's mostly nature and not nurture. I always like to say both of my children, my daughter's 39 now, and my son's 34. Both of them are accomplished musicians. My daughter is quite the pianist, and also plays all sorts of instruments. She's actually working as a music therapist. My son is a phenomenal guitar player, and he's got, I don't know, 6 or 8 different kinds of guitars. And, I really think a lot of their music talent is innate, quite frankly. It's not like they grew up in, like the Von Trapp family, if you ever saw The Sound of Music, where we all stood around the piano and sang and played instruments and something like that. Not hardly. The extent of the environment contributing to their musical talent is we paid for guitar lessons and we paid for piano lessons. And unlike some kids that I remember when my son said, I want to learn how to play the guitar, our attitude was, we'll buy him a guitar. We bought him a guitar and an amp for his 14th birthday, and we thought, this won't even last 6 months. Ha! It's lasted a long time. He's got talent. And my daughter, we never had to tell our kids, you need to sit down and practice music now. No, it was always the other way around. Like, we have to stop playing the guitar or the piano and come to dinner. That's the way it was. And if you go through our family histories, my wife plays the piano, and she had an aunt that played the piano quite well. My maternal grandmother was apparently quite a pianist, and my maternal grandfather was an accomplished musician as well. But, not my mother or any of my uncles who grew up in that home were musicians at all. So where does that come from? Is it in their genetic code somewhere? It's not just environment. There's more to it than that. Well, enjoy jumping into this topic.